understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I am excited today. It's going to be an awesome show. I have my esteemed guest, Dr. Kennedy Torkura. Because I know when we met, you were in school. So now I know you don't post it on your LinkedIn a lot, but I want to refer to you as Dr. Kennedy Torkura because you have earned it, my friend. How are you today?
Hey, Nnamdi, thank you so much for having me again today. I'm super excited about what we're going to be talking today, and just a little bit correction. I'm still working on the doctor.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, no,
it's still. I mean, it's nice to already mention it. Maybe it's like a prophecy, but yeah, it's something in view. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Nnamdi.
that's awesome. I know that similar to you, I'm in a PhD program myself, and when you get to the point where you finish all the class requirements and you do the qualification exams, and then it's like, okay, now it's on you, man. And I was like, whatever. So, but it's like sometimes the free time you have to make your own research and do everything. Before you were on like a class regimented schedule, and then you did the qual. Now that that's over, it's this endless time. So trust me, my advisor wants me to finish in the next year. I'm like, I don't know about that because I got a lot of things going on. So I totally understand. I totally understand.
Yeah.
Today's episode is attack your clouds before hackers do. Even though I'm familiar with Kennedy, he's been on this show for quite a number of years. Some of our new audience members may not. So let me read his bio so you can get to know him as well. Kennedy Torkura is the CTO and co-founder of Mitigant, an innovative cloud security startup based in Germany. He has spent over 12 years in cybersecurity and is passionate about exploring the intersection of security chaos engineering, incident response, risk analysis, and threat detection for securing cloud infrastructure. Kennedy has published over 20 academic papers about several cloud security domains and contributed to the first O'Reilly book on security chaos engineering. He is also a fourth-time member of the AWS Community Builder Program. He has spoken at various international conferences, including KubeCon, Cloud Native Security Day, NDC, Chaos Carnival, and B-Sides Berlin. Amazing, man. 20 academic papers, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Because in addition to working and also in academia, I know the challenges of papers. So the fact that you have 20 out the way, man, totally outstanding, and I really respect that. Today's topic: attack your clouds before hackers do. Look, everybody different. The news about threats and breaches, especially with United Healthcare, has been ongoing. Even though we are a fintech show, we obviously look at security overall in different verticals. So I think today's episode is really important. Especially our target is our fintechs, and every fintech that I know, they are using one of the big three cloud providers, whether it's AWS, Google, GCP, or Microsoft Azure. So when you have your infrastructure primarily on the cloud, it's obviously risk there. In general, like it's risk in general. And infrastructure anywhere, there's always security risk. But understanding the cloud environment and understanding how to secure it is really important in general, because you have your crown jewels there in terms of your data and your applications, and obviously sensitive data, whether you're in the fintech vertical where you're dealing with a lot of potential, personal identifiable information from your customers and banking credentials and so forth, or other verticals like healthcare, if you're dealing with health records and certain things. So I know for Mitigant, that is also your mission. That's why I wanted to make it the title of the show. So explain to me, what does that mean? Let's get into the whole idea of attack your cloud before hackers do. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Thanks, Anamdi. So, I think at the surface, when you talk about attacking your cloud before hackers do, it sounds a little bit like what you shouldn't do, right? However, if we take a step back and even try to understand our, let's say, our physical bodies, like how do we become strong? Let's take a kid, right? When a kid is born, the kid can it's the kid crawls. The kid needs to learn how to walk, right? And if the parents say, hey, because the kid might fall down, we shouldn't allow the kid to learn how to walk, or you want to keep on holding the kid is never going to learn how to walk. And during the process of learning how to walk, the kid will have a couple of, with fall, we knock off stuff, and then gradually the kid actually learns how to walk. It's try and error, and that's how the kid understands the world. That's how it understands. It goes to school, it faces things that are uncomfortable, and it grows. So the same thing, when we talk about our digital systems, cloud infrastructure, and all of that, we know that the threat landscape is rapidly evolving, and attackers are very creative. And on the other hand, we put in place a lot of mechanisms to stop them. But these mechanisms we put in place are there's no guarantee that they are effective enough. So that's why the only way you can actually validate the effectiveness of whatever you have put in place is by actually testing them. And this testing is actually, it's the whole attacking thing, right? You have to attack them by yourself, and then you validate how effective they are. It turns out that most of the time you begin to, let's say, let's just use the word security testing rather than attack. When you begin to test them, you realize, well, either some of the tools are misconfigured, or you find out that they're not working as effectively as you thought about. And it actually, the other problem we have in our space is a lot of us go to vendors and we acquire different kinds of security tools. And of course, the vendor tells us a lot of stuff, and just deploying without validating whether what the vendor promised actually is what you get is kind of risky. So you have to test, you have to validate that it's kind of effective enough in your environment before you kind of you get that guarantee. So testing, attacking your cloud is just about the process of validating that your defenses are as strong as you want them to be. They're able to ward off or thwart the kinds of threats that you envisage, will come against you, and then have that confidence in your ability to defend these threats.
No, I mean, thanks for that explanation. And you know what? I need to take a little bit of a pause before we go on, just for some housekeeping stuff. We are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and we also have a stream going from Instagram. Anyone who has a question, comment about the show, feel free to drop it in the chat, and we'll ask Kennedy, or we'll address it. Or even if you want to add some insight to the episode, feel free to drop it in the chat. Those on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, when you drop it in your chat, we'll make it part of the show. Instagram is from another stream, so we'll just verbally mention the question. Just had to give that mention one time. So, I mean, it's really interesting what you said. So we work, a lot of startups look at our show. They might be limited on resources. How would they know what type of attacks to actually inject into their cloud environment?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And I think it's not only startups. So even companies, big companies, they don't have it all. They always have resource constraints, either in terms of finances or manpower or stuff like that. And I think that at the center of whatever we do in security is our threat model, right? And your threat model, we already learned, you have to understand whether you're defending against script kiddies, or you're defending against, nation state actors, or just like you have to understand your industry. In the fintech, you have to understand what kind of threat actors are more prevalent in your industry, and do you think they will come after you? And this is something you have to intentionally sit down, and most people do it through they do kind of have a threat modeling workshop where they talk together with the stakeholders, and then you define what you have to do. Now, based on that, if you were in the cloud, for example, on AWS, the assumption is you already have you do your basic hygiene, which is to put in place something that takes or solves the misconfiguration problems, which is typically a cloud security posture management system. It's there to detect all of that misconfigurations, and you can actually start from there to say, well, how am I sure that I get notified if an S3 bucket gets public? And that's, let's assume you're using S3. It might be you're not using S3. It might be that you're using just virtual machines or Kubernetes clusters. You know, it all depends on your context. But you have to like sit down and think about that, and then think about your threat model, and from there you decide on where you want to start. And just going back to the issue of resource constraints, it has to be um, within your capabilities, right? What you can do. I think in the security industry, a lot of us are already very, very much conversant with things like testing applications, right? We do like doing vulnerability, using vulnerability scanners to check, and that's because it's already defined. But again, even in that context, people don't test for everything. They just kind of identify the barest minimum test they should run and run it, and that already gives them a feeling. So you just have to define it based on your threat model and your context, and just do it based on your resource limitations.
So I mean, and I think we need to emphasize that because I like that point. I mean, what no matter which vertical you're in, let's
Yeah,
really talk about the threat model aspect so people can understand how important that is. Because
yeah,
obviously, you can't test reasonably for everything under the sun. Like no one has that unlimited amount of resources.
yeah,
So let's highlight what you're saying, right? So we're in a certain vertical. Let's say right now it shows the tech behind fintech. We're in that vertical.
yeah,
You know, the just for people who are not as familiar with security, right? We need two things for an attack to happen. We
yeah,
need a threat, as Kennedy mentioned, right? Different threat actors, and we need a vulnerability. So that
yeah.
threat needs to exploit a vulnerability so
Correct.
that the actual attack can happen.
Yeah,
So those are the two things you need, right?
yeah,
So when we talk about now the threat model, what we're saying now is, okay, cool. You're in this vertical of fintech. What are the potential threats that are out there, right? Who's targeting fintech? What can potentially happen? So
yeah,
understanding that. Now, are you going to get everything under the sun? You may miss one or two, but the exercise still has to happen because now you start saying, okay, in one column you have your threats, and now we're going to see, okay, what type of vulnerabilities can those threats exploit, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and for people starting off, a really good resource is the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right? If you want to
yes,
Google that, because now you can kind of see the different threat actors out there and what verticals they target, and you can kind of use that for your threat model. So and the reason why, and I'm happy you brought that up, and the reason I'm spending time on it, because as we mentioned, with limited resources, these types of exercise, mind you, these exercises has no one's using a tool yet. No one's using. It's just a good conversation. You start
yes,
writing these down. You could document it wherever, but
all right,
this is real low tech that
yeah,
can be really beneficial in terms of designing your security program.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And just to kind of add up to what you just mentioned, it's important to understand that this threat model workshop or exercise is not just for security people. I think this is kind of a misconception. You gather security people and discuss. It's great, but I've been in situations where we're discussing with DevOps, we're discussing with even software developers. Because in the end, they're the ones building the applications. They know the context, and they're going to be telling you things you never imagined, right? So, and this is where you just, as a security guy, you just have to actually just understand them. You have to be as quiet as possible, understand what they are saying, taking down the notes. In the end, also they're the ones who do most of the fixing in most places, right? So they are very key to understanding the threat model. And I just wanted to highlight this point because it's commonly misconceived.
Cross-team collaboration, right? And
Yeah.
even to understand the different threats out there for your threat model, in addition to what Kennedy's saying, even talking with the business, right?
Yeah,
Because
correct.
it's a full company effort at that point. And,
Yeah.
and the reason I like this direction that we're talking about, because it's extremely low tech, right? This isn't, it doesn't take
The
like
basics.
it's real basic. And I think starting from that standpoint is really excellent. Therefore, like people who are not necessarily in security can
Yeah.
can be part of that conversation because
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you brought that up because if you just have the security team, like the security team usually is a very small percentage of the overall organization, extremely small. So
Yeah.
it's to a point they're knowledgeable about the security efforts, but they're really become internal consultants for security. But they have to secure something, right?
Yeah.
And that
Correct.
something is the stuff that other people on the team understand. So
Correct.
so it's great point. I love that aspect.
Yeah.
Now the second part you brought up, and I want people to understand that cloud security posture management, right? Can you get into what that is and why it's so important?
Yeah, sure. So, when the cloud came in about a decade ago, a lot of companies, or let's say actually few companies, just adopted the cloud, went in there, and they weren't clear about what security in the cloud looks like, right? And so the most common assumption, which is still there today, is the cloud service providers will take care of everything security. So you just pack your bags, go there, and then everything is okay. It turns out that there are a lot of things you got to do, and that's called the shared responsibility model. But it means that a lot of logical security configuration implementation has to be done by us, the consumers of the cloud. Now, um, you know, about 5 years into the cloud journey, there were a lot of attacks, and Gartner made a lot survey, and they came up with a conclusion that 99% of cloud breaches will be because of customers' mistakes, customers' misconfiguration. And I think according to the report, that's going to be until next year. So this is already um, 3 or 4 years since it was out. So that means that virtually every cloud attack you hear about, it's not because of the provider, but it's going to be because all the consumers made mistakes. We misconfigured things. We left the door open, And so, in a bid to solve this problem, the whole idea of cloud security posture management came up as a market category. And so, what this tool does is it helps customers to take care of their own responsibility, primarily by checking um, if things are misconfigured, things like S3 buckets, security groups for virtual machines. So it basically goes through the best practices that have been provided by the cloud service provider, and which also the best practices that have been recommended also by different regulatory bodies like the Center for Internet Security and and compliance framework. So it basically goes through this list and identifies violations and then tells you about these violations. So at the basis of a cloud security management, that is what it does. But of course, nowadays they do much more than that. Some of them are looking at also the virtual machines that are doing like more or less to some extent the traditional vulnerability management, which is to check the packages and the virtual machines to identify the packages that are that have reported vulnerabilities, to tell you that, to even things like asset management. So kind of getting an inventory of resources we have in the cloud, showing it to you, helping you to manage them, and some of them do some kind of cost things. So, but I think at the core, the center of the cloud security posture management tool is to identify violations of compliance or configuration best practices. Best practices.
So no, thanks for that explanation. So so we went from threat model, we went from the cloud security posture management. So it's and it goes back to low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So a lot of these majority of things, as Kennedy just mentioned, it's just due to configuration issues. So and that leads me into what they call the shared security model. So I want to bring this chart over, right? So in most cloud, well, not well, in all, most of the big three cloud providers, there's a concept called the security shared responsibility model. And what that means is the cloud providers responsible for certain aspects of the cloud, and the customer, which is you're responsible for other aspects. People think because the big misconception is, well, I deployed my application to the cloud and I pay, let's just say hypothetically, AWS, and they should be responsible for everything. And you couldn't be more incorrect, right? Um, let's go over what everybody's responsible for. So they have a say, AWS is responsibility for security of the cloud. So what does that mean? That means that if you try to physically go into an AWS data center, you will not be let in. They are not going to let anyone physically come into their data center and just take servers. It's very secure, and most likely you will be detained or you might be killed. Who knows, right? So that's not happening, right? So they're responsible of the cloud, and when we say the cloud, just so those people can understand it, right? They all of it are definitely computers and servers somewhere. It just happens that these servers are not on your premises. They're on AWS is responsible for that. So they're responsible for the hardware and global infrastructure, and replace AWS with Azure, Google, all same concept, right? So it's a model. They're responsible now for the software that they provide in the cloud, right? All of that, they're responsible for that. The customer, though, and Kennedy, feel free to jump in, is responsible for what's in the cloud. So let's say that you deploy your own server, right? And that server has an operating system on it. You're responsible for the updates as you would your local machine. You're responsible for your applications. You're responsible for your customer data. Now, if you're leveraging an AWS managed product, let's say that's something that they manage themselves, they're responsible for that, right? Because you're just using their for their computer, whatever. But if you're managing, like when we say the EC2 server or something that basically you deployed in the cloud, you're responsible for that. And so that means you're responsible for the security around that. Back to what Kennedy's saying with the cloud, posture management system, right? So now, who's responsible for ensuring that certain rules are met? That's you. Who's responsible for making sure that the certificates, the keys, everything is up to date? That's you. And the cloud security posture management system will leverage certain frameworks, as Kennedy mentioned, to ensure that, okay, where are the violations taking place? And now you have to fix that to ensure that you're up to date. If you don't, as what he mentioned earlier with the Gartner report, they show that the majority of breaches and things that happen are just due to misconfigurations. So that's why I put that up. Kennedy, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it beautifully, and I think this is this is very important for a lot of people who are coming in from traditional data centers, where, as you mentioned, they either have access to where the server room, when I was in school, you could basically, not everyone, but you could you could get a key and go to the server room and go in, right? It's not going to happen in the cloud. In fact, they even try to conceal the physical locations of the server. Like sometimes you don't know, they just tell you it's in Frankfurt, for example. You don't know the room it is. You have no knowledge, and you don't care actually to know. And also it becomes very important also for like people who are used to traditional data centers, because the whole logical configuration is a little bit different. People were used to like configuring Cisco routers and all of that kind of stuff. Now you don't have a router, you just have some kind of logical things. You have APIs you could use. You could have maybe like the AWS or the cloud console, the web browser where you go in and do all that kind of stuff. And this it could be a learning curve for certain kinds of individuals, and actually things keep on changing, so it gets like you mentioned, Namdi, which is very important. It's not totally the way it is here, because of this problem of misconfiguration. The cloud service provider started providing some managed services. For example, they have RDS on AWS, which is essentially a database. And this database, you don't even have a lot of things are managed, and you can't do an SSH like into to do some commands. You can do all that kind of stuff. They just give you access to the database and some other access to some analysis of what's going on there, some logs. They provide logs for you and all of that, just to kind of help to manage, help you to manage the system. But at the end of the day, the basics are still there. Things like the ports should not be open. You should make sure that you have good, passwords or certificates, that are implemented implemented to prevent unauthorized access to these resources.
So, and I think this goes back to the point why we use these types of tools, because it may be hard for people to remember all of these different things that have to be in place. Like even me as a professional, right? So, one of the things that we do with the compliance frameworks that we use, or compliance automation solutions that we use that connects to your various cloud environments, it gives us this information. So now we have the laundry list of things that we have to correct. So whether we're using a cloud security posture management system, or we're using some sort of compliance automation that connects into one of your cloud providers, it helps provide this list. So now okay, here are the misconfigurations, and here are the things that I need to stand up. I mean, and in FinTech, we talk a lot about SOC 2, going for your SOC 2, especially in the US. I know in Germany it's more the ISO 27001. But
yeah,
besides getting getting compliant in that, right? The thing that helps with your security aspect is, as you start going through these types of frameworks and you start connecting it to your systems, it provides you the laundry list of things that you need to fix so you can improve your security posture, especially in the cloud. So mind you, right, all of the things that we're talking about, we're not even getting into the attacks yet, because these things are kind of foundational things you need to do. And you'll be so surprised that what I've seen, once you start fixing the foundation aspects, it solves like the majority of your potential exposure risk, right? And a lot of people don't get that. I mean, I know we're so used to, watching TV shows, and these guys are doing Mission Impossible type things to get into these systems. But in reality, someone just exploiting a low-hanging fruit that you left, that you didn't resolve. Because
correct.
it's from a threat actor perspective, right? Why am I want the path of least resistance to get the bag. So do I want to go through some convoluted process to break into something when I could just, this guy left the port open, I'm going to go after that. It's easier. Like, why waste time?
Absolutely. So so just to talk a little bit also about why we need the tools. is because unlike traditional systems where your settings, your physical servers, the IP addresses, they hardly change, the ports numbers, the names, all of that kind of stuff. They are kind of fixed. The perimeter defense is static. In the cloud, all of these things are changing constantly. So even if you were able to have a list, the list becomes obsolete with the next change, which could be the very next day. So you realize that you need some automation to take care of all of that stuff for you, so that you can keep track of these changes. So, and that's exactly what the CSPM and other cloud security tools do. They are directly connecting to the cloud API, and then they get correct information, valid, updated information about all of that, and then they can kind of try to take care of whatever problems, or at least bring these problems to your notice.
No, I love it. And I just love how our conversation right now is really emphasizing the point of attack the cloud, your cloud before hackers do. Because what this process that we're talking about is called, from the other side, as a threat actor, is called reconnaissance, right? They're going to go and
Yeah.
gather as much information as possible. That's the goal. They're going to, because they want to use that information to, find vulnerabilities eventually to exploit you. They have to go through, it's, let's make an analogy, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that you wanted to let's say that you were something everybody could relate to. You're interested in somebody romantically, right? You don't know them yet, or you don't know them, but you saw them somewhere. So you ask your friends about this person. Oh, what are they about? Oh, what are they? So you're doing reconnaissance. You're trying to gather
Yeah.
information about this person
Yeah.
before you go and talk to them, so you can come with some level of background. Threat actors are doing the same thing, right?
Same
They
thing.
gather
Same thing.
information.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
if you have something publicly exposed, like a publicly exposed URL, the same way that you can run a scan on it, the threat actor can run a scan on it. So, like, because it's public, let's run a scan, let's see what happens, right?
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
you remember what we said earlier, right? Threat, and then the vulnerability, and then you get
Yeah.
exploited.
Yeah.
Um, so, what I want to do is, as we're talking about any more foundational things that we should cover.
So probably another thing that is foundational, which might not seem foundational from the surface, is which actually is a huge threat vector, which is actually one of the ways where the low-hanging fruit actually the attackers use to go into cloud infrastructure are the API keys, right? So in the formal world, we have username, password thing, and then we try to keep it secure because we will manually log in. But in the cloud, a lot of the fun part of the store of the cloud is the ability to do a lot of things with the BRS minimum. One single API call, you have multiple servers doing awesome stuff. But for them to do that, you need to give them access. You need to delegate access to them, and that's where the API keys come. That's how they come in here. But somehow, in the beginning, people started hard coding the keys in software and putting it on GitHub. And this was so nice for attackers because they could just harvest the entire GitHub repositories and get access to these keys and get into the cloud and inherit whatever permissions which the software had, which usually is highly privileged, so they can do their job. And this is still happening today because and attackers are still using it, either getting these API keys directly from GitHub or from the code repositories, or the attackers who are a little bit more crafty, basically, in fact, they use social engineering, so they kind of manipulate people to click stuff, install malware on their systems, and the malware knows where the keys most likely are. And it goes back to what you're saying, Nandi, this whole attacker mindset. We often think that attackers are some uneducated people who are homeless, who have no options of life, and they literally literally have no, they're just dumb. It turns out these guys are probably, some of them are better educated than some of us. They read documentation of this stuff. They know how, they're well informed. So when they go into an API, into a laptop that is compromised, they know exactly, most likely, where you're going to keep API keys. So they just go there, harvest it, and they're already in the cloud. And it's not the easiest. It's not always easy to actually detect these kinds of activities.
That is it's an excellent point. And the beauty sometimes about doing a virtual live show is that I could just go Google something. I want to read. When you said that, I got a stat that I want to read. I love stats. The majority of organizations surveyed, 60% have fallen victim to API related incidents within the past 2 years. And out of those, 74% suffered from 3 or more breaches. Worse, 23% endured over 6 breaches. These findings suggest a consistent security gap. The consequences of API data breaches are brutal.
Wow.
Yeah. Because as soon as you said it, I said, "Oh my God!" Because this is something that a while ago I was doing some research, and it's like it was an article or some paper that came around saying like API the new ground for breaches or whatever. It was something like that, and no one. It's what happens is this, right? Let's understand those. We have to understand the different, like you said, mind state, right? So we talked about the mind state of an attacker, mind state of a developer. I have a series of tasks I need to complete from a product owner or from the business, and this will help the companies. We go live. This is our bottom line. Our applications have to be up. So I'm bogged down with all these stuff. I'm just developing it. I'm working. My head is down. I might not be thinking about, no, not I might not. Most likely I'm not thinking about security. I'm thinking about my deliverable. So, and so I'm leveraging it, anything to make my job easier and quick. And this is not a knock on developers. Obviously, the whole ecosystem needs developers or we wouldn't even have jobs. But the point is, right, that security is not the main concern. And now we have a situation where the only people leveraging the API keys are developers. So now you have the majority, no one is leveraging it. But I mean, the whole idea of an API is application programmable
interface.
So that means someone who's programming is leveraging it. So when I say that, I mean, now I say that because now it's shielded from only people that are developing. So what does that mean? So that means that because it's shielded, who's responsible for that? If it's shielded from everyone else, but the people developing, and the people developing are not thinking about security, and you expose.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point that you mentioned. So how can organizations protect themselves from API vulnerabilities based on the stat that I just read? Obviously, it's a big deal. Obviously, it's what I mentioned, right? Only a certain amount of people even have access, even know what's going on. Like you're not going to have the business or the product owner talking about, oh, I was just going down and checking the API. No, nobody's doing that, right?
Yeah.
What do we do to?
Yeah, so over the years, different approaches have been recommended. Obviously, there is no silver bullet because, as we mentioned before, attackers are very crafty and very creative. They always find a way around. But so when we talk about API keys, usually they are usually just maybe 1, 2, or 3, 4 strings, which are used. AWS and other cloud service providers, they provide or they offer some countermeasures. First, they advise you not to use keys that are long-lived. So meaning that whatever that is used to authenticate and authorize has a time limit. And that is just because if at all it gets compromised, the compromise itself is limited to the time that thing has access to. So that already is one way of doing it. The other thing which is fundamental is keys shouldn't be hard coded on GitHub. So it shouldn't be there. GitHub, even if you think even if you're using a private repository, it could just be compromised. You never know. So sometimes most people begin to use some kind of vault, which is essentially an isolated place where you can keep keys or whatever material you use for access, which actually makes it much more difficult for attackers to have, to easily get it. So that's another way actually of actually reducing or preventing these kinds of attacks. The other Another thing people are doing is they are using authentication providers. So you're talking about other companies or products or tools that you kind of outsource the whole authentication to them. So they're like in the middle between you and the cloud service. So if a developer needs to do stuff, or he kind of goes to them, he kind of authenticates to them. They know who the developer is, and they give the developer a time limited access to the cloud service, the product. And that's also nice also because in that case the developer doesn't have any material on him that helps to access. He goes there when he goes to the middle party when he needs access. The party gives him some access, which in most times is time limited, and then he does what he wants to do. So there are a lot of frameworks that are doing this today. And in the end, it's just about establishing some kind of guardrails, whatever that means to an organization. um, it doesn't have to be too much of a hassle, because then the developers, as you mentioned, he has deliverables. He just wants to do his job. And what we're talking about shouldn't be an additional burden to him, but it should be something that is easily done. And I think the basic part, which I didn't mention before, is all about awareness, right? So in the end, the guy is a human being. You need to explain to him why he has to go all through this, and he needs to get into it. He needs to understand at least the basics of that, which is usually through some companies have this they call it security champions program, where they kind of teach a little bit of security to developers, or even security awareness programs. That's basically on the human side, of solving this problem. And there are lots more approaches that companies are using beyond what I've mentioned.
No, I love it. At this time, we have to take a brief moment for our sponsors, and we're going to be right back. And I'm going to jump into some other topics with Kennedy, especially regarding the threat actor scenario that he mentioned. We'll be right back from this brief moment from our sponsor.
Are you an emerging fintech with a limited budget seeking more sales and partners? Introducing Strategic Generation, your partner in leveraging cybersecurity for sales and partner enablement. Fintechs often lose opportunities due to unsophisticated cybersecurity programs. That's where we come in. Strategic Generation assists with due diligence, security posture visibility, penetration testing, and on-demand virtual CISO services. We connect your systems to our partnered platform, and voila! Instant access to real-time diagnostics and compliance frameworks such as SOC 2 and PCI DSS. Gain the confidence of prospects and partners. Strengthen your cybersecurity program and drive success. Stop losing deals due to cybersecurity. Visit strategicgeneration.com and click on On-Demand CISO to connect with an expert.
So I want to bring up what you mentioned before. You mentioned, the stigma about threat actors, or what people might refer to as hackers. But I know in the security world, they mostly say threat actors, right? And I want people to understand something. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, right? So you have situations where the same way you go into an office and you work your 9-to-5 jobs, there are buildings dedicated to organizations that they go into work, but their job is to find ways to data breach, to ransomware attack, you name it, that's their job. And that's what they work on. Whether it's a criminal organization, whether it's sponsored by a nation state actor, meaning literally sponsored by a government with unlimited amount of resources. So, and the people working there are just as qualified, sometimes even more qualified in terms of education and background and research to execute their task. So it's really important to understand that, and why, having these guardrails are so important that Kennedy is talking about. We have a comment from the audience. Let me put it on. From Ben. Definitely just design, but boy, do I love those cyber looking logos and the cyber lines coming out of them in that animation. Okay, not sure what that means exactly, but thank you for the comment. So I wanted to bring that up in terms of what's going on just in general, and the threat actors, and basically it's organized crime.
Yeah. So it's a very important topic because most of us are already used to the whole crime, like physical crime, right? We are used to them. We see police people going around. We see police people in places, and they're serving as to deter crime or to actually be able to stop crime. And the moment we started becoming digitalized, also crime became digitalized, and actually it's more convenient for them to do that, right? And it has become quite successful, and there are people who just study this. And I can't remember the report I read some time ago where they actually said, some of these organizations are better organized than our organizations. They got a hierarchy, they got the budget, the most interesting part is they also have middlemen. So for example, the whole ransomware crime, why it became so prevalent is because a set of middlemen came in between, so they build the tools, and people who want to run ransomware they rent the software for some time, use it, and pay some commission. You can imagine. So before it used to be like criminals have to write exploits, like we mentioned about the vulnerability, they detect it, and then they have to write software that exploits it. But that was years ago. Right now, the way we can go and buy software operating system, there are markets where they just go there and buy a software that helps them to attack. So they don't need to be developers. They don't need to have the skills. They just need to have the creativity to, and the passion for that. And it's so lucrative that a lot of places, like you mentioned recently, I watched a movie Beehive. Beehive, that's the name of the movie. So the guy went into the building, and these guys are all seated in an open space building the way we have in our offices, and they're all hacking. They're all doing social engineering, and they have like a line manager who is directing them, telling them what to do, and fascinating. So just as you mentioned, this whole world is really organized, and they are not joking. They're out for profit, and they have goals, they have budget, they have all that stuff in place.
Yeah, I want to address that. Ben said, "Oh, just about your sponsor." Oh, thank you very much, Ben. Really appreciate it. Our sponsor ad. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I didn't see the movie yet. I heard about it, but yeah, similar concept. And what you're referring to, ransomware as a service. So as Kennedy's mentioned, right? Actual, you like how they have software as a service, ransomware as a service, and I think that was the United Healthcare breach, right? They have a ransomware attack recently, and that was coordinated with the middleman that Kennedy's referring to, and the actual attackers leveraged the whole ransomware as a service company to do it. That's a whole other conversation in terms of what went down there. But yeah, no, to your point, it's extremely organized. So that means from a defender perspective, we also have to be organized. And the thing about these attackers in the organization that they're the organized level that they're working with, it's literally one focused goal. So imagine that a whole organization with one focused goal to breach you, where here, you have a small team, and sometimes, a lot of these startups don't even have a security person working with them at all. The whole thing is, let's go to market. Let's go to market. Okay, yeah, that's great.
Exactly.
It's nothing there. So, you know, when you have an organization now whose sole focus is to get a data breach, is to lock up your systems, is to extort money from you, and you don't have anyone defending you. So, or because you're not the thing with so I think you have startups that got money from VCs and investors. I think it's almost irresponsible not to have certain protections in place, because the unfortunate thing of the matter is not just the financial impact of the
Yeah.
breach, also
Yeah.
the reputation.
Yeah.
And that can literally end your company. You may have to,
Correct.
or just put you out of business. So it's
Correct.
extremely important to have these things in place, especially with the low hang. I mean, do yourself a favor, right? If the API thing seems a little bit what Kennedy has mentioned a little over your head, just Google API best security practices. You're gonna get a list. Start
Yeah.
implementing the list. That's it.
Yeah.
Real,
Yeah.
real
That's it.
straightforward.
That's it. That's it. I mean, nowadays also, I know that there's a lot of limitations for security folks. We already know that the market is seriously understaffed. So there's a huge skill gap. But also there are ways around it. There are a lot of consultants, there are companies. I know the vast majority of them are highly priced, but they're also, some I know of some business models where, for example, CISO as a service, all of these models have come in to kind of help, so you can outsource your security to them, and then they kind of try to help tidy things down. And the cloud service providers are also helping a lot. So they also have beginning to roll out different kinds of security services that you can actually subscribe to with a click of a button once you're using these products or these services, and they can already at least give you a basic security hygiene, which already you know closes a lot of these doors that we're talking about.
I mean, it's really awesome. What I like to do, and before I know we're coming towards the end of the show, so what I like to do now is give my guests the platform so you can talk about Mitigant, talk about people can find you, what you guys are doing, and I'm going to give you that space to do so.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So basically at Mitigant, what we do, we are a cloud security company. We're based in Berlin, Germany. And we do three main things. So the first thing we do, we offer a cloud security posture management system, like we talked about, and that is for infrastructure on AWS as well as on Azure, and that kind of helps you to kind of have a basic security hygiene for your cloud infrastructure. The second thing we do, we do the similar thing, but now for Kubernetes. So for Kubernetes, we know that it's another abstraction layer below, or let's say on top of the cloud infrastructure. And so we have a Kubernetes security posture management system that helps to take care of the security of your Kubernetes clusters as well as the compliance. That's the second thing we do. And the third thing we do, which is actually our unique selling proposition, we have a cloud attack emulation platform. And what that does is a bunch of things. So firstly, it helps you to be able to check, to do basic things, things like attack emulation, which you might look at as some kind of penetration testing. So you can actually validate the strength or the efficiency of your security setup, your security mechanisms, and you can do that if you can't afford things like red team, red teaming, or you don't have people who can do such things. You can use our attack emulation platform. It has a bunch of We have implemented a lot of MITRE attack techniques, and you can run these attacks based on your threat model, and that's super fast. That's super easy, and you can just use it and run the attacks that are relevant for you, and you are able to basically validate how strong your cloud attack your infrastructure is. And all of that is connected. The whole platform is connected to Slack, so it makes it easier for you to communicate or collaborate with your teams. You have emails, you have reports being sent to email, and there's a lot happening there. So you can easily sign up at mitigant.io. You can easily sign up for all of these. You have a 1-month trial. You can use any of the products, and then you can see how it fits for you. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm also very active on Twitter. I'm always happy to speak to anybody about cloud security topics. Thank you very much.
I know. Thank you very much, Kennedy. I took the liberty of posting the Mitigant URL, so people, it's part of the video now forever while you were talking, so people know where to find you. It is also in the comments. So before we end, we also have another comment from someone. Let's just post it real quick. Each One Teach One Tech. Please check this out. It is a registered apprentice program, a nonprofit organization that provides the tools and resources needed by the underserved communities to remain gainfully employed in the area of cybersecurity. This allows them to have a better life outcome. We are working with this communities in a production environment, SOC membership, and MSS membership subscription. Website is eachoneteachone.us if you need highly trained workforce ready for security analysts. Okay, cool. Thanks for watching the show. Appreciate it. As always, guys, really enjoyed the conversation today. You can find us at techbehindfintech.com. Please go to the website and register there so you can be part of our email list. Let me pull the website up. Let me put the website up on our URL. You can find us at techbehindfintech.com. Every week on Friday, 12 p.m., we're gonna have a live show, so you can get back with us Fridays, 12 p.m. EST. We go live every Friday. Thank you very much for viewing the show. If you can, click on our YouTube page and subscribe. We are trying to raise our YouTube subscribers, so that'll be greatly appreciated as well. My name is Nnamdi Osuagwu. I'm the host of the Tech Behind FinTech. We want to thank our guest, Kennedy Torkura, CTO and founder of Mitigant, for a great conversation today. And to all, have a wonderful weekend. Kennedy, stay around. Let's have a conversation after the credits go.
Thank you so
guys,
much.
Again, thank you very much.
Hi, everyone.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.